Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it is my great pleasure and honor to welcome you, all of you here with me at Operaterrassen in Stockholm, those of you watching this award ceremony from home, or those of you who might be watching this at some point in the future. This is the 2024 award ceremony for the Global Award for Entrepreneurship Research, which has, since its inception in 1996, become the foremost global award for research on entrepreneurship in the world. My name is Katrine Kielos-Marsal. I'm a financial journalist and author, and my books on women and innovation and women and economics have been published in more than 20 languages. Now, Henry Leland, the founder of Cadillac, famously, very famously said, "There are only two people I take off my hat to. One is the President of the United States, and the other is Mr. Johansson from Sweden." Now, you're all thinking, which Mr. Johansson? This is not an uncommon name in Sweden. He was referring to the Swedish entrepreneur, scientist and inventor Carl Edvard Johansson from Frötuna in Roslagen. He revolutionized precision measuring of industrial parts. And the artist, Carl Milles, created one of his last great works in Mr. Johansson's honor. And this work is called The Hand of God. The original is in Eskilstuna, and a recast version of it stands in Detroit, Michigan. And a reproduction of it is here, given as part of tonight's award, together with the prize sum of 100,000 euros. The partners behind the award are the Swedish Entrepreneurship Forum and the sponsors Vinnova and the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. Now, Carl Milles' famous sculpture is a work of art created to honor innovation and entrepreneurship, which we are doing here today. But not just that, we are also here to try to understand entrepreneurship better, because we all recognize how absolutely crucial it is for our economies, societies, and the future of this planet. That is the mission of this award, and that was the spirit behind this work of art behind me. Now, please welcome Anders Broström from Swedish Entrepreneurship Forum up on stage. He is the managing director. He's also associate professor and university lecturer in economics with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. Why? There you are. Why is research on entrepreneurship so important?
Well, I think to answer the question, we need to think about entrepreneurship research and what it is and what makes it different from perhaps other types of social science. So entrepreneurship research is very phenomenon-oriented. It focuses on the practice and draws on many disciplinary perspectives to understand this phenomenon. So if it's important, it's because the phenomenon in itself is very important. And this realization that it is, I think, grew at least during the 1980s and 90s for the first time, that Western economies were increasingly dependent on entrepreneurs to create jobs and to innovate and to take us forward. And so we needed research to understand how this is happening, why it's happening, and if it's going to keep happening unless we optimize society in some way to make that happen.
So would you agree that we know surprisingly little about entrepreneurship, given what a huge role it plays and its massive economic importance, for example?
It's still a very young field, entrepreneurship research. The prize was first given out in 1996, also about the time when entrepreneurship was really taking off as a research subject in its own right. So there is still a lot of work to do, and the prize in itself also serves as a way to showcase the state of the art of what we do know so far about this topic, the phenomenon.
And what will we learn tonight? Or this afternoon?
Tonight we will learn to put the human in the center for maybe the first time in the history of the prize. Entrepreneurship you can understand as a social phenomenon, as something happening in firms, in societies, and systems. But tonight it's very much about the people.
And why is that important?
Because entrepreneurs, I've happened to observe, are people.
Oh, really?
So,
Yes.
so what they feel, what they think, what they do, is at the end of the day what matters.
Okay, it's not just about the hand of God, as the sculpture says, but about people. So please stay here. As mentioned, the sponsors of the award are Vinnova and the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences. So please welcome Darja Isaksson, Director General at Vinnova, and Fredrik Hörstedt, who is Executive Vice President and Secretary to the Academy. Yes, thank you. Now, Darja Isaksson, I want to ask you, the context of this award, of course, is that we are meeting here in beautiful Stockholm, and Stockholm has been called a unicorn factory. It has been called the Silicon Valley of Europe. How do those headlines, perhaps created by us in the media, actually hold up, particularly in the current unstable global economy?
That's a very valid question. I'll get to that soon. First, I just have to say how delighted I am to actually be here. So thank you so much for that. Entreprenörskapsforum celebrating the entrepreneurs, and this prize celebrating the people who empower us with knowledge on how to support entrepreneurship even more. It's a relevant question. I would say Sweden has a long history of being a leader in innovation. We are still consistently ranked as one of the top leading innovation countries in the world, being second on the Global Innovation Index. If we look at the entrepreneurs and the new startup scale-ups, we do also notice that Sweden is in the top 10 of all countries in the world in terms of absolute numbers of unicorns per capita. That's not bad for a population of 10 million people. And I'm also very happy to see that in terms of these very important new deep tech startups and scale-ups that we really need, not least to address many of our current big challenges. Stockholm was ranked second after London and just before Paris, being the third ecosystem in Europe in terms of raising capital to these important startups and scale-ups. So I'm happy to say that the innovation country Sweden is alive and kicking, very much thanks to the entrepreneurs here.
But do we know why Sweden is doing so well, connected to what Anders Broström was saying about that we might not know enough about entrepreneurship? I want to ask you, Fredrik Hörstedt, politicians often want to promote entrepreneurship. What do we know about which policies work or not, and what role can and should entrepreneurship research play here?
Well, to some extent, entrepreneurship as a research area is not very different from any other research area, you might say. It's about the research results yielding an impact on society. So if it's material science, or if it's life science, or if it's entrepreneurship science, it really doesn't matter in one sense. So what we need is really to have important decision about society in large, where entrepreneurship can play a role. We would like the entrepreneurship result to contribute to a kind of solid ground of these decisions. So proven empirical experience, robust facta, robust information, but also research results. I think that's a key role to play, and that's also why Eva liked this research award so much. This is kind of the core, you might say, of the Academy.
Okay. So, Anders Broström, would you like to come in on that one? Do countries and regions that do well, like, for example, Sweden, but also other parts of the world, certainly, do they know why they're doing well?
Maybe they'd like to think so. I mean, we all have our stories and history about why we are who we are and how we came to be that.
Yeah.
I think for Sweden, certainly, our modern history is certainly very much about entrepreneurship in a way that took us away from an agrarian society into an industrial society, and then perhaps into even more a digital greenhouse. But the question then is, what is the next step for Sweden and for entrepreneurs in Sweden? Where are we heading, and who is taking us there, and what do they need to make that happen?
And what might be the answer to that question? Maybe Darja Isaksson knows.
Yeah, but if I can weigh in also, I think another thing we often tell ourselves is just being this very small country after all, we are very well aware of how dependent we are on contributing value to others, way outside our own borders, and how aware we are of that requires collaborations. And it really requires being open to and learning from the best wherever you may find them, and basing every decision on the best knowledge at hand. And I think that's also why we are all very happy to be able to listen to the award winners of today. So that's one thing in terms of collaboration. And I would also like to, in terms of next step, just note that we are also very aware that big societal changes have happened before, not least because of entrepreneurs bringing out new solutions. But we are living in a time right now where this is more important than ever. It's actually existential for all of us that we get this right. And that's why I would say in next step, we have every reason to really look for the best knowledge that we can. And also remember, it takes a village to raise a child. So we are celebrating the entrepreneurs. We need to support them, but we really need to create these opportunities together, both different stakeholders and across country borders.
So just to clarify, you are talking about the green transition and the importance of aligning entrepreneurs with that mission and the need of entrepreneurship to solve those problems. Yes.
Climate crisis, green transition, those are big challenges. Ensuring resilience, security, other ones, also part of that.
So big ones, okay. Also, you're talking about the importance of collaboration. So let's talk about Europe for a moment. There is a lot of talk at the moment about the European economy lagging the US one, Europe losing out to the US and China on innovation, particularly artificial intelligence. What can we do?
You're looking at me.
I'm looking at you.
Yes. So, that actually, many of us are looking forward for the report from Mr. Draghi that will come out quite soon. He's been sharing a few views. We are aware. Let's just put it this way: where we are competitive in terms of knowledge, talent, etc., we understand the competitiveness, but also contributing to the global challenges require us to be able to take risk. There needs to be opportunities for these new innovations to scale. And those things really demand both access to capital, but it demands regulatory frameworks that make it possible. It requires the synchronization of anything from infrastructure to access to talent. And that's also why I think it's clear that, to create these opportunities and to be the kind of for Europe to be able to not only be relevant, but a relevant part of the solutions we all need, we have a lot of work to do.
We have a lot of work to do. Okay, Fredrik Hörstedt, leaving former Italian prime ministers and their reports aside for a moment, what does Sweden do well, particularly when it comes to entrepreneurship, and what can be done better?
Well, the broad answer is really to look at the European Innovation Scoreboard. We have some strong input factors in that cross-EU survey, one might say. We can bring forward human capital factor of Sweden. We have a well-built-out university system. We have access to skilled labor. However, when we focus on particular areas of strength, that kind of knowledge in that particular niche is very scarce. So hence the war for talents, hence the need to attract talents, students, professionals to Sweden, to have them contribute to our operations and also have them being retained here in Sweden afterwards. And then it's another issue of mobility of Swedes. We need to move between regions. That's an additional need. And I think pointing out another thing is that Sweden is a trust-based society. We have trust in society institutions. We have trust between single individual. And that helps a lot for the mobility of ideas. We move quite easily across borders and boundaries in the broad sense in Sweden. And if we talk about deep tech ventures as an issue as a phenomenon that we need to focus on further, then we have a lot of things regarding the established structure in Sweden, but it's also about cross-sectorial collaboration. It's not so easy for a university professor to bring in a team of entrepreneurs or venture capitalists or what have you from the outside environment. Trust in that setting, I think, is really vital.
Coming together from different environments. On that note, Anders Broström, Professor Robert Barron, one of the recipients of this year's award, has written that entrepreneurship research is quite good at avoiding the multi-tower effect of academia because it naturally spans so many different fields. Do you agree? And what could policymaking that wants to promote entrepreneurship learn from this?
I think it's very true with our observations. So, Katrin, you've written about Adam Smith and his mother.
I have, yes.
So
Thanks for bringing that up.
Adam Smith, for a long time, I mean, of course, is a dominating figure, and rightly so, in economics. But to understand entrepreneurship, economists and other people that are studying entrepreneurship had to move away from the representative firm, perhaps, and the sort of the entrepreneur-less economy, or that representation. So we need to bring in people, among other things, into the equation. We need to learn that perhaps less than an equilibrium where everything is sort of sorted out nicely, entrepreneurship is very much about experimentation. So it's about experimenting and failing a lot of times, or taking new paths and discovering that what you initially thought was not the way to go, or maybe the feasible way to go, and changing the course and trying again. So policymakers need to make sure that we have conditions that facilitate experimentation. And once we do, we also know that most people don't know exactly. That we believe in our own solutions as entrepreneurs, so to speak, but we can't know which one of the 10,000 people having ideas about that is going to end up being right. So we need those conditions to be there.
Thank you so much. Please give the first panel a hand. So we have entrepreneurs are humans. We're now going to move on to the next panel. So please welcome Kerstin Cooley, who's a pioneer Swedish investor and managing partner at Brightly Ventures, Mikaela Berglund, who's the CEO and partner at Feminvest, and Stefan Krok, chairman of Kivia. Please. There is water. So I want to start with you, Stefan. You've been an entrepreneur since you were 7, we established, speaking on the phone last week. You were selling strawberries. Do you think your story is typical? Are certain people just born with entrepreneurial traits? Or would you say that being an entrepreneur is more of a skill set that everyone could learn? Big difference, right?
Yeah, I think there's also research and lots of monitors, and I think it's great to see a great entrepreneur. It depends on what kind of entrepreneurship we are also talking about, and I think we are basically here talking about things that scale and solve big solutions and stuff. But so we have to sort out entrepreneurship as a sort of as a way of having a nice freedom, sort of gig working. Because that's entrepreneurs as well, right? But if we talk about entrepreneurship, which entrepreneurs that wants to build something that is bigger than themselves, to scale stuff, I think they all need to train. They can all get better, but I don't think that anyone can become an entrepreneur of that. I think that's something that you have a talent for. Just like not everyone can be world champion in ice hockey or tennis or whatever. We can all get better at tennis if we try, but we won't be champions. I tried.
Mikaela Berglund, would you say that our idea of who is and who can become an entrepreneur is, in many cases, too narrow and limited in a way that it sometimes might, for example, exclude women, or might make it difficult for women to identify with this role of being an entrepreneur?
I definitely think that if we only look into the history books, like one of the reasons we love AI, because we got the algorithms that we can lean back on. Similarly with entrepreneurship, we look back into the history books, and that is one result. But what if we want to get a new result? We need to do something differently. And if we look at who's been an entrepreneur into the history books, and primarily, there's a network in Sweden called 17 where women have been so successful at scaling businesses. They are all, have an annual revenue of more than 50 million Swedish kronor. They asked themselves, have we raised any funds here? Almost none had raised any funds, and that is quite equivalent to who gets funding. So yes, we need to look at the future and look into what opportunities do we see, and can we do something differently, firstly?
So huge untapped potential there, right?
Definitely. And I was actually working just fun statistics on this matter. I was working for a company that had a CEO, that it was a listed company, and the CEO was called Anders. And for those of you who have been working with the stock-listed environment, you know that it's more frequent to be named Anders as a CEO at the stock market than to be a woman. And he left. He was an excellent guy, but he left, and a new Anders took place. And the chair of the board was called Per Anders. And they studied together at Handelshögskolan or Stockholm Business School back in the days in the 70s. And that's why they trusted each other to put themselves in different positions. And that is also one of the things that we need to look at. Strong networks that are actually holding back innovation and for new entrepreneurs to take place. And amongst those, women.
Yeah. Okay. Kerstin, you've been part of this Swedish ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship that we had described in the previous panel. What was it like being part of this and witnessing it all grow to these levels during a very sort of short period of time?
Yeah, I just realized listening to them that I've been investing in early stage companies for 15 years, and I haven't connected with the research behind entrepreneurs. So maybe that's what I should dwell into for the next. Yeah. So we should remember that this super vibrant ecosystem that you were describing, that's next to par with Silicon Valley, has only been around for 10, 15 years. Yeah. When we launched our first fund in 2012, there were barely any early stage investors around. There were bigger firms like Northern Creandum and Industry Fund, and there were quite a few business angels, which Sweden has had a lot of. But in between, it was practically empty. And for the next few years, it was amazing to see all the incubators and accelerators growing, the co-working spaces popping up, more and more events targeting startups and entrepreneurship. Investors from near and far. London investors would travel in here every quarter and meet with all the local VCs to see, where could they come in. But more than that was the inspiration that came from the successful entrepreneurs and the unicorns, both from the gaming industry, which obviously was really big at the time, but also Klarna and Spotify and all the rest of them, that inspired people in these organizations to take the step to venture into their own startups. And that comes back to the question: is everyone suited to run a company or become a successful entrepreneur? But at least, it's one of the things I think that it has been driving the fact that now to be an entrepreneur is a job. It's a career choice.
And should it be?
I think it goes back to the question about what type of entrepreneur and what kind of business you're trying to build. And that also goes back to the female entrepreneurs, because I think that often female entrepreneurs are building different type of companies. They don't necessarily raise money. They are profitable from the beginning and so on. I think that to be the big scaling entrepreneur, you need some certain traits to succeed.
Do you want to say something about which traits?
You have to almost be a superhero, because you have to manage and deal with so many different things. You need complete perseverance and never giving up. You need super lots of passion, that the energy that's going to drive you to never give up. You need to be able to sell not only to clients, but also to investors and to co-workers, people that you need to gather the best people to your company, and you need to keep them. And to do that, you also need to delegate and not take all the responsibility yourself. And then you need to maneuver in this constant state of not knowing what's going to happen, and it will definitely not happen in the way that you thought about, and all the uncertainty and ambiguity. And so basically, find a person like that.
It's not easy. Or maybe more people can become a person like that, developing the right skill set. But I guess that's a bigger discussion. Stefan, you are not just a skilled strawberry picker and successful entrepreneur. You're also an investor. What are you looking for as an investor?
I think I'm looking for some of the things that we just heard. It's passion and passionate about what they want to accomplish, but also a true nerd that really wants to focus on it and spend all basically times of the day that they are awake, possibly dream about it as well. And they're eager to learn. They are certain about what they're going to do, but they're eager to find out things that actually have to change their way. But they don't give up and don't have a mind. They know what they want to do tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, but they're prepared to change it because they're curious and they always look on where can they move with the best odds in the direction that will take them to their goal. So I think if you really scale, you have to sacrifice a lot. I don't think things that I've been contemplating, having been an entrepreneur, is about sort of what do I cherish in a person, and what do I see it takes as an entrepreneur, putting me now into that field, and it's not always the most lovable creatures, right? They focus so much on what they want to do that balance, other interests, family, and stuff like that are often sacrificed.
But Michaela Bayland, if I understand you correctly, you are saying that we don't just need these superheroes / not very lovable creatures that we've just had described
they
to us.
can be lovable, but it's hard to be.
No, you just said... I have you on camera saying that. Michaela Bayland, we need to widen this definition of who can be an entrepreneur, because we need to tap into a wider set of skills and potential in the economy. Am I understanding you right?
Yeah, definitely. We're not letting, and actually, to be honest, if we look at European data, Sweden is one of the worst countries in Europe when it comes to women entrepreneurs and new founded companies. So we shouldn't really tap our shoulder in that regard. And when it comes to private equity, we are also at the bottom list in Europe. We are not performing. We are not seeing the potential that other countries are seeing. So we think and pride ourselves to be so equal that we actually lose our speed. So what I think that we need to do is men need to start investing in women. That is one of the core factors. But because if we look at who's been doing the exits for the last 60 to 70 years, it's been men to the majority. We look at Albright presented data in 2021 of women in management and board and how much they own in the companies that went listed, that went public, an exit that entrepreneurs would look for. They own 1% of the companies they work for, whereas men in board and management own 99% in relations. So women are not having enough money at the moment. So we need men to look at women equally and say, I don't understand femtech, but I see that there's huge potential within the segment, and I'll make sure to put myself in a position where I learn about it as well. So not just the entrepreneurs need to be able to listen, also the investors need to change and move in a direction, because we as women cannot do it together on our own. We need to do it together. And we have a deal flow. And I sat in a meeting not too long time ago with an investor that's been investing and raising funds to entrepreneurs for 15 years, millions and millions of euros. And he said, I don't think there is one female founder that is actually owning a company that would be investable. He's been raising so much money. And he even said to me in this meeting, and I told you I wouldn't bring this up, but now I need to do it. Because I don't want to be a victim. I want to be treated equally. And that's why I don't want to bring those stories up. But I told him, I want to do this and I want to do this. And he said, oh, that's going to be difficult. And I was like, but you have a person in your board that did this. He's my benchmark. And he was like, yeah, but I know that he crunched glass for 10 years. So just by our first meeting, he assumed I wouldn't do the same. I wouldn't be willing to do it. Obviously, he don't know me. But then, so he both said, there's no potential women, there's no business case out there. He's sitting on a lot of money and has been for so long. So obviously there is prejudice there. But I don't want to be the one standing on the other side and say, hey, we are good enough. I want men to actually see that and say, we see the potential together with you. We'll support.
Yes, and we can't, given the size of the challenges, we can't afford to be prejudiced. We need, to tap into all the talent and potential we have available to us and be ever so grateful for it. Kerstin, you have said that you don't invest in ideas, you invest in people. How did you come to this conclusion?
I do invest in ideas, but I just find them secondary to the people.
Okay.
Because the best idea can be wasted by a poor entrepreneur, and a poor entrepreneur can make gold out of a mediocre idea. It goes back to that the fact that you need to work hard and really be something exceptional. And I learned this the hard way, investing in companies that had really good products and customers were willing to pay and were happy, but the company couldn't succeed because it's easy to come up with an idea. It's reasonably easy to raise your first ticket from an investor. But then, executing, making that big scalable company, that's the difficulty. And that takes a certain type of entrepreneur, male or female. But I have to second a little bit with Stefan saying, there's something you have to find pattern recognition in finding these people. And they aren't always, it's something that's like hurting.
What does that mean?
If they're just super nice and selling you something and it's all good and they have to be a little obnoxious as well.
A little bit obnoxious. Okay. No, that makes sense, right? Yeah.
Because that goes back to that, being so nerdy and just focusing your whole life, not caring about certain things that other people think it's important.
Okay, so we're talking about the psychology of entrepreneurship this afternoon. So you would say that one of the psychological traits, and I don't know if this is an official psychological trait, that you're looking for is obnoxiousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Stefan, quite briefly, you have said that you are happy to invest in a bad idea, even if the person that this idea belongs to and the person coming into your office, I assume you have an office, with this idea is the right person. Why is that? So you're taking it one step further.
Yeah, I can at least take it one step further. It's not in minus if you have a good idea.
Yeah.
But I think it's again the passion and the sort of, if you have a person that knows an industry or is prepared to really get to know it, he or she can navigate and find a way. But most business plans are wrong. So if it's a new idea, odds are that it's wrong. And they will only find out when they start moving. And when they start moving, they can navigate and they will find the way. But if people that believe that you make a great business plan, that's one reason why I'm not so fond of being part of sort of business plan contests and the like, because then you kind of build up an image that the business plan is the thing. It's almost always wrong. I would say, maybe I would even say they are always wrong. You just don't know what's wrong, and if it's a really vital part being wrong or not. So what you really need is the person. So yes, I have invested in business plans where I said, I really don't believe in this business plan, but I believe in you. And yeah, in some cases there have been great companies coming out of it. But yeah.
Can I add one thing?
Yes,
being a really good entrepreneur doesn't mean that you have to be the CEO of the company, because some good entrepreneurs realize that they are not the people, or they're not, for some reason there should be someone else in their place, and that's.
So realizing the ability to realize one's limitations as well. So it's not about the business plan, it's about the human, but not all humans are created equally in the eyes of venture capital, right? And we need to change that. Thank you very much to this excellent panel. Give them a hand. We are going to move on. And we are going to be able to enjoy some beautiful music here. Lilla Akademin is a well-established music school and one of the most significant institutions in Scandinavia for training young musicians. And we will, in just a minute, have the pleasure of listening to a young brass quintet playing Att angöra en brygga by two Swedish composers. And so setting up here behind me, welcome Kari Oscar, Malte, Myra, and Tristan. So now things are being moved around slightly up here on this stage because we are approaching the main dish, so to say, of the afternoon. So I want you all to welcome Lars Baxell, Chairman and founder of Resi Farm, and Ivo Sander, Chairman of the Prize Committee and Professor at Uppsala University, up on stage. Lars will, I believe, say a few words about the history of this award and the work of the Prize Committee. And Ivo Sander has an important piece of paper somewhere, I hope, which has the winner of the winners of the prize and the reason why they are winning this award this year.
Thank you, Karin. Well, I think that all of you would like to know why you are here, so that's why I'm going to go through the sort of stipulates a little bit out. So, some people call it act of God, but it's God's hand. So just so you know the happening of that. That was a joke. If any one of you have an idea of sort of ambitions to receive the prize, then at least I think it would be fair for you to know what are the conditions, what are the requirements. And the prime reason for receiving the award is outstanding scientific achievement. In addition, other aspects may be factored in. The ambition behind the award is threefold: to highlight the importance of research produced in the areas of entrepreneurship and small businesses, to further stimulate and promote research within these fields. You listen carefully, Michael? Yeah, good. And to diffuse the state-of-art research among scholars, policymakers, practitioners, and people involved in small business development. Now, here we go. The prize may be rewarded contributions to all relevant aspects of entrepreneurship, including the environment and the organization in which the entrepreneurship is conducted, the character of the entrepreneurial process, and the role of entrepreneur. Now, if you look at the prize, as we heard previously here, that was given out first time in 1996, and see the development over the 26, I think, laureates that have been given it. I think you can see also an evolution of a field, which I think is quite fascinating. The first, I would say, 10, 15 years, most of the prize focused on where the stage of the research was, which was basically the function of entrepreneur, or what was an entrepreneur, what was the sort of rationale and the legitimacy of being an entrepreneur, or having that in a society. And then over time, one started also looking into what are the surroundings, what is the environment that this entrepreneur has to work in. I think Per, who I saw here, there you are, last year was very much focusing on these conditions and what really gave the opportunity. I hope I'm not saying wrong now. Thank you. But now I think we have taken a major step forward and bring all this together with what we heard previously, namely that what is this sort of intrinsic here, namely the entrepreneur. Without him or her, there will be no entrepreneurship. And that is what I'm so interested to listen to, what is going to be your story and your research presented later. And to do this, we have a committee, which is headed by Ivo. And Ivo will give you a little bit background to the reason for this year's award and also how you work, right?
Good. Thank you, Lars. Yes, very briefly then, how does this work? And you can probably guess it. This is a major award. I would say it is the major award in entrepreneurship research. So it has structure and it is a formal process. So essentially it runs over an entire year with different meetings. It opens up with nominations, and we have world-leading scholars doing the nominations, editors of the major journals, and the committee can nominate itself, particularly prominent researchers. So that's the nominations. And then from this, we may use some help from leading scholars internationally to select a few of these nominees to be assessed more thoroughly. So there we take help and we need help. So we have assessments of these potential candidates. Next, a short list of candidates, essentially, who could be awarded the prize this particular year. So, and we can have long discussions about this. I said we take help, but the ultimate decision is always ours, who will receive the prize. That prize winners are all prominent, you know. So after this, there is decision time, and it may take some time to find the winners, but we know they're always worthy winners of the prize. So that's essentially it. And then you can read about the articles that come out after this. Look at Entrepreneurship Forum. Everything is there if you want to learn more about the prize winners. Catherine, we're already doing too long. I can see your stress level.
No, you're fine, actually. You're actually fine.
But you need a little bit of a background here,
Absolutely.
I'm thinking. So let me then read to you as we get to the main dish. And if I understand things correctly...
You are the main dish, I'm not.
No. Michael, you will be talking here. There's also going to be a video with Robert Barron, who cannot be with us today for health reasons, but he will say a hello on video to us all. So you are really the main dish today. Michael, looking forward. And I know you want to get into things here and have the truth. So let me then read to you sort of the motivation for this year's prize. Most of you know already, but I could repeat this as well. So there's a short sentence, essentially. Why were these two people awarded the prize? For expanding the psychological foundations of entrepreneurship and enabling a vibrant stream of evidence-based research on the micro foundations of entrepreneurship. Look what you have done here, Michael. There is also a motivation, and you can read the full motivation on Entrepreneurship Forum. I'm going to take the main parts here. So, as a motivation, Professor Robert Barron and Professor Michael Frese have spearheaded groundbreaking research aimed at answering a set of fundamental questions about human psychology and entrepreneurship. These questions include why certain individuals decide to engage in entrepreneurship, while others do not. That was an issue we talked about previously. How they recognize, assess, and act upon new opportunities, and what factors contribute to varying degrees of success in pursuing these opportunities. As long-standing ambassadors for the study of the psychological foundations of entrepreneurship, Professor Robert Barron and Professor Michael Frese have inspired a new generation of researchers to engage with the questions of why, how, and with what effect some individuals choose to pursue entrepreneurship. The pioneering, engaged, and practically relevant scholarship for which they have been recognized is of critical importance for the continued development and success of entrepreneurship research. So, two fantastic award winners. Michael, you will be up next and explain in more detail what you have found.
But I think you should also give him
Yeah.
the prize, because you're hogging it there in the corner. So please welcome Professor Frese.
So, once again, it's not act of God.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful. Look at this. My name finally.
The hand of God.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And while
Thank you very
you
much.
prepare to address the audience with your
Yes.
lecture, we're going to hear some brief words from Professor Robert Barron.
Yeah. We first have Robert Barron.
Yes.
Evening. I would like to say first that I apologize for not being there in person, but unfortunately at the moment it would be very difficult for me to make the arduous journey from Oklahoma, which you may remember or think of as the land of oil wells and cowboys, to your beautiful city. I apologize. Next, let me say that I am truly honored by this award, and basically especially pleased with it because it is based in part on my efforts to achieve a goal I set for myself 25 years ago, and that was to import relevant information from psychology into our field of entrepreneurship. If I've made progress in that regard and it's recognized in this award, then I'm extremely happy. Now, let me say that as a psychologist, most of this work was focused, as you might guess, on the entrepreneur. And I was interested in trying to get information on how they think, how they make decisions, how they set goals, how they recognize opportunities, how they deal with stress, and what skills they need in order to succeed. Basically, I hope I made some progress and that it has added to our understanding of this complex process through which entrepreneurs create something new and better and something that may change the lives of millions of people and sometimes the world. One other point I'd like to make is a response to a question that's often asked by my friends, not former friends, in psychology, and that is, how, Robert, and why did you ever get into this role of importer of psychology? Well, I look back on my life, and there are three kinds of factors, and all three involve people. The first is that my grandfather and two of my uncles were entrepreneurs. And one of my uncles spent a fair amount of time trying to convince me that I should follow in his footsteps. Second person is my daughter. My daughter, when she started college, complained about the conditions in her dorm room. She said the air was very dusty, there were bad smells in the air, and the noise was so intense that she couldn't study. So at the time, I had been doing research in psychology on how the physical environment, lighting, temperature, air quality, fragrance, influences task performance and social interactions. So I put that research together and came up with a device that would accomplish all three: filter the air, perhaps get rid of noise cancellation, and also release pleasant odors if the owner of the device wanted to do that. I applied for a patent, got 2 patents on this device, this product, and then licensed it to a big organization that actually manufactured and produced it and sent out units that were ordered directly from us. The third reason that I became an entrepreneur, the third influence, was a very esteemed colleague of mine, Venkatraman. And he suggested to me after I started a company that I might be able to make a contribution to the field of entrepreneurship because I understood the process both from the inside as an entrepreneur and from the outside as a psychologist who could observe it. That's where the journey that brought me here tonight started. And I want to say again that I'm extremely honored to receive this award, and I want to thank all the people who were involved in conferring it on me. And I want to thank you, my audience, for bearing with me during this long and rambling series of personal observations. Thank you.
No. Thank you. Thank you. And Professor Barron, if you're watching, this was not long and rambling at all, and we're very grateful for these words. Now, Professor Michael Frese, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here. I'm delighted to get this award. It's a fantastic award. I mean, there is no second of that type in the world. And so I am really glad to be here. Quite frankly, when I heard the talks before, I wished I would have heard them before I actually developed my talk. I would have given a different type of talk, most likely. But I invite you to make the crossing from the sort of hero stories that we were talking about, Sweden being the most fantastic place in Europe, etc., to the not quite so fantastic places that I will be talking about in, for example, Uganda, where it's a little more difficult to be an entrepreneur, and still I think we can learn an enormous amount from them. So that's my point. Now, let me just say one more thing about what is an entrepreneur. There are many definitions. For me, actually, I'm German, I like the German word Unternehmer. Somebody who undertakes, who does something about things, who takes on a problem and solves it. Yeah? And it doesn't take on any kind of problem, but some problem that actually has chances to be solved, and that he can actually work on it to solve it in the cultural and other environment that he is in. And that's my definition of entrepreneurship. So why did I get into entrepreneurship? Quite frankly, I became a visiting professor in Zimbabwe a long time ago. And I liked Africa. I thought it was a fantastic continent. And I liked to think, what can I as a psychologist contribute to changing poverty into something positive? And it took me a while, about a few years, to actually understand that entrepreneurship was the starting point. And that's why I became an entrepreneurship researcher. So now I'm talking about lessons from Africa, lessons from African entrepreneurship. And of course, I also want to talk about psychology to some extent. And I want to persuade you that a psychological perspective might help to understand entrepreneurship better. So, but also might help to actually deal with the big problem, the grand problem of poverty. And so this is what I will be talking about. And I will be talking about a concept of psychological preparedness. And let me just say very briefly, there was a nature-nurture discussion just before, and I'm absolutely happy to go into that discussion. I can determine a lot and actually contribute a lot to that. But let me just say, I don't care that some things are genetic. I'm absolutely delighted to accept that about 30, 40, 50% is genetic. I care about the rest of the 50%. Okay? So I'm more interested in changing things than I am in selecting the right person sort of approach. Yeah? So, and I will be talking about psychological preparedness as being the kind of thing that you have to teach to people to actually be useful as an entrepreneur. And then I will be talking about generalization issues as well. So this is, if you want to have a picture of psychology and entrepreneurship, that's a good picture. I won't go into it, okay? I will not describe it. I will not talk about it. I'm going to go past it immediately, and I concentrate on this. I want to argue that at the end of the day, it's only important that you act. At the end of the day, the action counts. That's what the entrepreneur does. And therefore, quite frankly, I am always talking about the issue, we shouldn't be only concerned about the environment. We should be concerned about the environment action into action. We should ask the question, how can we change our actions so that it fits the environment, and how can we make the environment fit to the kinds of things that we want to do? So that's why I'm not going to talk about this big picture, but if you want to talk about it, I'd be glad to talk 5 hours about it, no problem, okay? So the way I'm thinking about it is the following. There are lots of countries that try to do a lot to make it easier for entrepreneurs to work. Sweden is one of them. And this is the sort of top-down, institutional, often regulatory processes, human capital, market size, scaling up, banking, ease of doing business, etc., etc. There are lots of other things that matter here. Then there's the bottom-up approach, and I stand for the bottom-up approach to some extent, of course. And I'm saying it's action-oriented entrepreneurial knowledge that is important to actually be able to deal with this, to actually make use of this kind of thing, the kinds of offers that the environment gives me. Yeah? And This is action-oriented knowledge, and the second part will be on personal initiative, which is sort of a little bit of a hobby of mine, and you will see a lot more that it actually is quite central to understanding entrepreneurship. Before I get into that, let me just talk a little bit about research methods and why it pays off to do studies in Africa. Why it paid off for me to do studies in Uganda first. Because one of the problems we have whenever we talk, let me just show you this again one more time. One of the problems that we have is whenever we reduce variance, then we get this kind of result. We get a zero relationship between constructs. Now let me show this one more time. So if we have a correlation of 0.3, good correlation in our field, we reduce variance, we come to a correlation of 0. Now, why is this important? Because whenever you do research on entrepreneurs, you do research on a selected group. Because there are lots of people who say, I have an idea, I have an opportunity concept, but I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't want to do this. And I don't want to get into these kinds of problems that you described, yeah? The superhero kind of version. Yeah? I don't have the edge, that you described. So then I stop. Or I actually start a little bit about it, and then I don't get the money from the bank, and it's too difficult to fill out these forms all the time, etc. And then I stop that. This is a selection process. Now, whenever there's a high degree of selection, we don't get to the truth anymore. And that's why I like to do research in an area where it's a little more necessity to actually start a company. And in Africa, you don't have a choice of saying, let me have a good unemployment insurance, or let me sit with my parents for a longer period of time in their house. You don't have those choices. You have to do something. And so I actually like, therefore, to work in countries that have a push towards entrepreneurship. That's the first thing. The second one is I want to do really serious evidence-based research. Now, to do that, you actually need lots of people who volunteer to participate in this. Now, I usually teach improvement of entrepreneurship in some way or another. Now, in Africa, when I teach that, I have lots and lots of people who want to hear. In Germany, 3,000 people I contact and 3 people come. So it's much easier to do research in an area where people want to have the push. All right? Africa is good for me. So I do research on 2 trainings that I have developed together with many people. And you see the first group of people here who have developed with me the project STEP. It's called Student Training for Entrepreneurial Promotion. It's a handful. The point is, it's a training that is working for BA students in developing countries. And I tell you what we do. In the first session, in the very first session, we'll tell people, sometimes also second, okay? But in the first session, we tell people, 5 of you in each group, and you start a company today. I don't care what company, I don't care in which direction, I don't care what you do in this company, but today you start. And then we use whatever they thought about, which is pedestrian sometimes. Selling orange juice, yeah? But also sometimes a bit less pedestrian, like developing, Uganda is a very religious country, developing a set of prayers on a disc. Yeah? I mean, these were all ideas that they had, And the point that I wanted to make about it is we don't really care what you do, but we teach from now on what it is to be a better entrepreneur. Okay, so we do have a unified theory of entrepreneurship, and I can talk about that a bit more later on. But the important thing is this starting point with the informal business in the first or second session. And then we have action principles. So whenever we take science, we reduce it to action principles that are easy to transpose, to translate, that are easy to understand and remember. And we use research sort of as a starting point for action principles. And the action principles then will be used together with the kinds of environment in which I am. I have problems, so we deal with it. We see what can we do about the problems. We have marketing issues, so we deal with the marketing issues. So the point then is, when I talk about marketing one more time, if I think of the 5 or 6 P's of marketing, I don't really care too much about every one of the P's. I care that we talk about one P in relationship, let's say product, in relationship to what you are now doing. What can you improve about the product? How can you make it more attractive? How can you actually make it cheaper, etc., etc. So we discuss action principles along those lines, and then they continue on working on their company. So they typically get $100 as a seed fund. They have to give it back at the end of the 3 months of the training course, and we usually get back 90%. I can tell you more about where the 10% goes. It's actually honest mistakes, and that's good because we like mistakes, we like experiments, we like that people use mistakes and we use them as a teaching device. So that's okay. But we do get it back, and we even, when they make a mistake, we say, okay, now you have to work a little harder, to actually be able to pay back what you owe us. So this is what we find. This is a randomized controlled group design. Same thing as you do in medicine, okay? So 400 people say, I'm interested to do this course. 200 people we take into the treatment. We give them the course. 200 people, we say, we're sorry, we don't have that much space. In a year's time, you can participate again. But you are still part of our group, so we will ask you questions, etc., and please answer them. So this is the way we do it. And then after this is like a year's time, we look at who is a business owner. Now, these are last semester BA students, okay? So we can actually see 6 months from now that's here. What are they doing? What are they thinking? In which way are they acting? And then we can see at year 1, are they a business owner or are they not a business owner? Yeah? And we see there are 2 things important. It's actually not so complicated. Huh? 2 things. Number 1 is you have to have a business, you have to have lots and lots, not just one. Lots and lots and lots of opportunity identifications. We don't care whether it's one. We care whether there are lots of them. Number 2 is you already do a lot in terms of entrepreneurial actions. You look for places where whenever you see something, you think of how can I make use of that as an entrepreneur. Yeah? And there's action knowledge that goes into it. There is entrepreneurial goals and action planning that goes into it. All of these kinds of things produce business ownership. Now, the proof of the pudding is always a bit later. Yeah? Now we have been able to get 6,000 and odd people in this training across lots and lots of countries, 11 countries, 32 or so universities. And this is what we find. 33% higher ownership after 2 years. You see in the very beginning, there's a huge difference between control and experimental group. Now, control group, They are in Africa. Huh? In the end of the day, they also have to start a company. Yeah, so many of them start a company. And of course, they go up a little bit. But still, at the end, we still have 33% higher impact on the experimental group. In terms of total income, 10% higher in the experimental group. That makes a difference. You know, if you have $100 per month, or you have 10% more, that's actually not nothing, okay? And we're talking about $100 per month as something that is quite good for them. And we also have lots and lots of opportunity identification differences also after 2 years, okay? So these are the kinds of things that happen then. These are the kinds of jobs that they created for themselves and for others. And I just want to talk about one person whom I talked about a lot because she was so instructive. She came in, she was the sort of poorest of the poorest person you can imagine. Raggedy clothes, very much demeaning towards us and towards everyone. You know, I'm nothing, that kind of stuff. This is her, you can't see it very well, but this is her now, like that. She is a fantastic, an enormously impressive person. Yeah? She has no problems going to TV and talking about what she needs to do. She reminds me of you. So the point is, we have to be really, you know, we have to see potential in people who don't have any potential. You know, it didn't look like she could actually be a portfolio entrepreneur. Now, she has several firms, you know, and just recently, when we did the stop of the discussion with her, recently started an IT consultancy. So the interesting thing is here, the development across time. So that's the question then is, how do you scale up? Yeah? So we have 6,000 odd people who are participating in the STEP training. That's great, but you should have scale up more. And so the scaling up really can only go via high schools. And therefore we did 800, we did it with 800 people in high schools to see whether the same kind of system works also with high school students. And I can tell you now, we haven't published the paper yet, but I can tell you now it works. So this is amazing. Again, randomized control group design. In this case, of course, whole school classes were randomly selected. And again, we see huge differences between the control group and the treatment group. So that's nice. So because now we can develop a sort of basic system of entrepreneurial competence in a society. Yeah? Now we come to the second point, and that's person initiative training. I've done this with lots of people, and this is just a small group of people, so I will not talk about each of them, and I should actually, but I can't. But I devote this prize also to them. It's really amazing what people have done with me and beyond me as well. So what is personal initiative? Now for me, personal initiative is a definition of entrepreneurship. Because what it means, personal initiative, is you self-start. You don't wait for other people. You don't ask other people, what can I do? You self-start. You do things. You take charge. You be an undertaker. Yeah? And the important thing is you don't even just check what is in the air. What's a good thing to do at the moment? Oh, let me do another thing on AI because it's, you know, everyone does it, so let me do that as well. No, you have to ask the question, where can I add something to what other people are doing? Don't mimic, but add something to it. And so that is personal initiative. Future-oriented. I have to think a little bit of what does the future give us and bring us. And so it's the future orientation that is also part of getting opportunities, but also problems. Yeah? And often enough, it's the problems. Often enough, by the way, really good entrepreneurs use the problems that they have. You know, I can't get this kind of thing done here. Why don't I start something? I know so many people who want to have X. Why don't I start something? That kind of thing. So future orientation is very important. And then I think you talked about that, overcoming barriers, persistence in overcoming barriers, not giving up, not sitting down, not saying, oh, it's all so frustrating, but continuing doing it, pushing. So that all leads to changing of the environment, often small little matters, but it changes the local environment. That's important. The opposite, of course, is reactive, and that is, thank you, I'm actually not quite so clumsy, but I, okay. But anyhow, so the opposite is the personal initiative, and you do what you're told. It's, what is important now. You don't develop opportunities. You stop when difficulties arise. You just react and you emulate others. Yeah? So now you can use these three things: self-starting, future orientation, overcoming barriers. And you can ask the question, how do you use it for goals, for your visions? How do you use it for search for opportunities? How do you use it when you look at your environment to understand your environment better? How do you use it when you plan? And by the way, planning is extremely important. But of course, we all know that they don't work. So the point is, how do you know that a plan might not work, but at the same time you plan, because otherwise you're only going to get surprised all the time. And so social networking, develop your market, developing resources, and developing yourself, deliberate practice. So in a way, then that's the point. That's what we want to teach, and this is what we want to develop. There is, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but there's a correlation between showing personal initiative and success. Okay, so it's not, I don't take it out of thin air. But now I want to change people. But just as an example, though, reactive, of course, is the opposite of personal initiative. If you're high on reactivity, you're not a highly successful entrepreneur. Yeah? These are a group of micro entrepreneurs in South Africa. If you're 39%, if you are low on the reactive strategy, high on personal initiative, you are much more likely to be in this group of really successful people. Yeah? Okay, let me just give you an example of how we do things. Just think very briefly about the last day you worked. And take out 2 hours, 9 to 11 or whatever, take out 2 hours, and I give you only 9 seconds. Think of what you could have done better in terms of personal initiative. The 3 things: self-startingness, future orientation, and thinking about overcoming barriers. Just think for 9 seconds what you could have done better. That's what we do with the entrepreneurs, of course, much longer. Yeah? 9 seconds, start now. Okay, what you probably found was one situation where you said, hey, I could have been more self-starting. I could have been better prepared. I could have thought more of what happens now, future orientation. I could have gone into this discussion better. Or I could have answered the email, not just reactive, just say yes, no, but thinking, what do I learn from this email and what can I actually contribute more to it? And where can I actually involve that person, for example, in the kinds of things that I want to do? You probably were thinking about those kinds of things. And so are the people who we are teaching. Okay? And of course, this will be discussed and in detail, etc., much more than we can do now. This is the effect. 30% higher profitability. Now we compared 1,500 entrepreneurs in Togo 500 people in the control group, 500 people in a traditional business training group, the kind of thing that you would love to have, and 500 people in the personal initiative training group. And here you see the difference. That's significantly different. That's not significantly different. So it pays off to use psychology. So the point then is, if you look at it long term, 57% higher profitability at the end of 2 years. So this is not nothing, okay? We have recently looked at those guys again 8 years later, and we find the same results. 8 years later, after 3 weeks training. That's amazing. Huh? Psychology pays. So you can watch that more. You can. There's a QR code here. My daughter made it for me. I would not have thought of a QR code anyhow. But this is giving the World Bank is talking about that project a bit more. So let me just say, this is all thoughtful psychological science behind it, and in my view, action theory. Yeah, and the action theory talks about how is an action sequence done, and how can we maneuver an action sequence into the direction of higher personal initiative. And that's what we do. So we have the goals and the information collection. We have self-starting, future orientation, overcoming barriers. You can imagine how that goes. And for example, action principles are these. Action principles in the planning phase are these. Your plan must imply that you can execute it without waiting for things to happen. Yeah? You can, if you say, I will do if I get that much money, no good plan. If I do and I need so much money, and today I'm starting to put a penny into a separate basket that I use to actually accomplish what I need to have in a year's time, then you have started today. So the point then is, the action principle is, don't plan for the future without connection between now and the plan. Yeah? The second one is, what opportunities would occur in the future? So don't, you cannot be too, it cannot be too stupid here that you immediately sort of say what will happen in this country or in that kind of environment in which I am. Develop backup plans. Develop backup plans is another issue. And of course, write down actions, keep the goal intact and change plans appropriately, and develop a 6-month plan at the end of the course. So these are the kinds of things that we do. I want to talk about one more project with you. In this case, it was Mozambican female farmers. The poorest of the poorest of the poorest. So the big question was, can we actually improve their lot? And these people were in many ways amazing. So the big issue was, they got the World Bank. I often work together with the World Bank. So the World Bank wanted to give them all an agricultural extension training, which means how to do agricultural farming better. Yeah? So kind of knowledge-driven, what can be done better. And also they wanted them to actually have cash crops a bit more, because they often were only thinking about what do I need the next year, instead of also how can I get actually a little bit of money from a cash crop. So the interesting thing was, half of the people who got the agricultural extension training got personal initiative training as well. And it's those people who actually used the knowledge of the agricultural extension training. They're the ones who actually use cash crops. We didn't teach them how to do cash crops. We taught them how to push things, how to deal with things, how to plan for things, how to put new ideas into the project. And you see much more cash crops when they have both of these things. Much more business profits when they have both of these things. Now, they have double as many side gigs those guys who participated in the personal initiative training. Sidekicks means small little companies that actually produce some things with not just produce rice, but actually make rice pudding and see how you can sell that. Yeah? Now, these are all causal studies. These are all like medicine, like really carefully developed causal studies where we can say this causes that one. Okay? So now comes the counter arguments. And the counter arguments are, can I have 2 more minutes for the counter arguments? 3 more minutes? I need 5, but it's okay. Let's negotiate a little more. Now, the point is, I am worried that we too often say, but this is necessity entrepreneurship. This is entrepreneurship because people don't have any other chance. This is poverty entrepreneurship. This does not apply to Sweden. I want to argue that it does apply to Sweden. Not, there may be a few steps in between that you have to take, but a few theoretical steps as well that you have to take. But the necessity entrepreneurship, I personally don't like that concept too much. Quite frankly, why? Because there is nobody in the whole world who is an entrepreneur who doesn't have to do things out of necessity. And there's nobody in the whole entrepreneurial world who doesn't have an idea of what he wants to achieve or she wants to achieve. And so at the end of the day, there's always the connection between opportunity and necessity. As a matter of fact, necessity is often good for you because necessity actually breeds creativity as well. And we can show that people who are under stress actually show more personal initiative than those people who are not under stress. So it's not true that it's always just because it sounds bad, it's going to be bad. Yeah? There are also lots of arguments as well. I'm not going to go into them. The next one is financial issues. Financial issues are, of course, important. And now I have to tell you some sad stories, Stefan, for you. The sad story is venture capitalists are not very good in predicting whether or not somebody is going to be a good owner or not, a good entrepreneur or not. And so there's lots of ideas around where actually where you need venture capitalists to actually sort of use them as a measurement device of who is a good entrepreneur and who is not. And we typically find that the correlation is next to 0 or 0, unfortunately. Where it's not 0, it's where venture capitalists think about the area in which there might be good business to be had. That works. So whenever you control for the area, then the correlation between prediction and success breaks down. Yeah? Okay, so therefore, the financial issue is an extremely complicated issue. We know that it's useful for people to have starting capital. We know that people always have too little money. Every entrepreneur in the whole world has too little money. And so therefore, it's always a difficulty to get enough starting capital. And the amazing thing is, even in the United States, the starting capital, the average is $28,000. And often enough, it's below $5,000. Now, obviously, $5,000 would go a long way in Uganda, but still, the point is, it's not that big, the starting capital that people typically have. We sometimes get sort of too fascinated by the Silicon Valley sort of equivalence idea. Yeah? So the lack of financial resources, I don't think is the big issue where the two are different, because all of them need money, yeah? And all of them need more actually to start a business. Okay, the last one is informal economy and informal entrepreneurship. And I want to just say on both of these last points, whenever you do studies like we do on step training, on personal initiative training, on personal initiative, you find out amazing things. Number one, we found that people who had financial problems, high capital constraints, and they were in the step training, they still started something. There were other people who had high capital constraints and they didn't start, and they were in the control group. And then the same thing for personal initiative. We looked at formal status. Formal status is, of course, sometimes, it has some advantages. Yeah? But there is no relationship between formal status and success. There is none. But, somebody turned it off now. Because I was too long. But anyhow, I tell you, and this is the last PowerPoint slide anyhow, I tell you that the formality is not the important issue. It's actually the interaction between being formal and showing personal initiative that is important. So once you show personal initiative, you can actually have more available resources, and you can use the available resources better in spite or because you're formal. Yeah? So interesting. So this is what I wanted to talk about. At the end of the day, it's the psychological preparedness that we should be worried about. And it's this kind of stuff that leads to psychological preparedness. I took out two of those. Action-oriented knowledge and personal initiative. I'm not saying that those are the only two, but these two are important. And so we have to always think big in terms of the macro regulatory issues and small because of having the psychological match, the click that is important, that you can actually start a company and succeed in the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your lecture. Thank you so much for your research. Thank you for sharing this with us, and congratulations again. And also, I think you forgot the hand of God up here on stage, but I'm sure we can get that to you. It is now my task to slowly try to wind down the formal part of this afternoon, and I feel I need some help. Lars, would you mind coming up here for a quick chat?
Sure.
What is your main takeaway from this lecture
I'm
we just
not
heard?
the main dish, I'm the dessert, right?
I guess. Well, I don't know. We can discuss this, but you are a reviewer of the main dish. So,
Okay.
what would you say what was just sitting down here, your main takeaway from this lecture we just heard?
I think it was very interesting, and I think the fact that sort of moving into a territory or a continent, you say, which do not have the same sort of conditions that we have here, and where you, in a sort of virginal way, could check certain criteria which it takes to be an entrepreneur and what makes it happen, so to say. And I think this push that you put on is vital, and it's probably something we don't talk about so much because we don't think that it's theoretically interesting or it doesn't give the sort of flavor of the day that we want to have. But if you look at the conditions, I can move myself back in time and say when I was, in the 70s or 80s, there was not so many entrepreneurs around when I started, and the condition at the time was that you didn't talk about certain things. You more or less did. Today, when you look at all the young people who are actually trying to set up something, there's so many barriers and there's so many conditions that they talk in between, and the financing condition, you have to do something marvelous, there has to be a fantastic product. And I think that sort of prevents you to take certain steps. I'm not saying that you should jump into the water just like that, but there's so many considerations which may not have anything to do with the business, but it's what do your friends say, what will mama and daddy say, or everything like that. And if you take that away and clear it and basically say you have to do it because this is your livelihood, so to say, I think you will get a much more clear picture of what is. So I really like what you presented.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It's all about action,
Absolutely.
as we heard. Thank you, Lars. And we've learned, or at least we've been maybe reminded of a beautiful German word today, Unternehmer, someone who undertakes a challenge or takes action to solve a problem. Now, isn't that a beautiful sentiment to end on, and isn't that necessary in these challenging times? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming here. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Thank you for contributing. My name is Katrine Kellos-Marsal. It's been my honor to lead this award ceremony for the Global Award for Entrepreneurship Research this year. Thank you so much. And refreshments will be served at the back of the room. Thank you.
Yeah.